Mr. Carroll, first of all, I'd like to thank you for giving us your valuable time for this video interview. It is going to be uploaded on Gurkhas.com website, and it's going to be shared with the wider Gurkha Nepalese community and friends of Gurkhas in UK, Nepal and across the globe. But I would like to clarify at the outset that we are fairly new to this format of news and events presentation, so I would ask for your and our viewers' understanding if there is any shortcomings in the process. Nevertheless, the format of this interview will be as follows. We'll start with a few questions relevant to the very high-profile and successful Gurkha Justice campaign, which you initiated and were a prominent member of. And then we'll pose a few questions from visitors to Gurkhas.com, because we had invited visitors to send you a few questions. And this will be followed by any key messages that you might have for the wider Gurkha Nepalese community. So shall we make a start?
Absolutely.
To begin with, can I request you to recall and share with our viewers what was it that first brought you in contact with the Gurkhas, and how did you get into initiating the Gurkha Justice campaign in the first place?
Well, for many years I've lived in Folkestone in Kent in southeast England, which is now really the home of the Gurkhas. Thousands of them serve at Shorncliffe Barracks.
Yes.
And I was a local politician. I wanted to be the local Member of Parliament for Folkestone.
Okay.
And so I was busy in the community helping with all sorts of problems for all sorts of people.
Okay.
People who didn't want their local post office to close, people who wanted an extra crossing on a main busy road. But one day I got a phone call from a colleague of mine called Brian Staley, who lives in Canterbury, and he said he'd heard that some Gurkhas were in distress and would I talk to them. And I said, well, of course I would. And at that time all I knew of Gurkhas was what my father had told me when I was a little boy sat on his knee, that they were of legendary valour with an incredible record of service, and that they were much loved by everybody who'd ever met them. That's all I knew. And a few days after that, 4 retired Gurkhas came to my home in Folkestone and literally knocked on the door and said, we have a terrible problem. One of our colleagues is in terrible trouble. I invited them in, and that's when the story came, because their colleague had been arrested and was about to be deported.
And it was picked up by the media, wasn't it?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because one of my first jobs, when I heard this terrible story of a retired Gurkha called Tej Limbu, who incidentally I've never met.
Okay.
He was the one that was arrested, taken to Dover and forced to leave Britain against his will on a flight from Heathrow. And I would one day really like to meet that man, because he was the spark.
So you still haven't met him?
I have never met him.
All right.
I've never met him, but I so vividly remember his name. And my first job when I heard that he'd been arrested was to find out why. And his colleague said, well, he just wanted to stay in Britain, and I couldn't understand that because I had no idea. Perhaps I should be cross with myself. I had no idea that retired Gurkhas weren't allowed to live in Britain. I thought maybe he'd been arrested for getting involved in trouble with the police or something. So my first job was to understand it. Once I got the issue, I thought, well, I need to tell lots of people. Then you have to get the media involved. And that was the first time in my life I had to approach the national media in Britain. Newspapers like the Daily Express, the BBC. There's a fantastic radio programme on the BBC called the Jeremy Vine Show.
Oh, right.
6 or 7 million people listen to it every day. And I knew I had to get the story of Tej Limbu and the story of the injustice for Gurkhas out in the papers like the Daily Express and on the radio and the TV. And I started that process the very next day.
Okay. And the media coverage, when it came out, did that give you a moral boost as to, like, you know, this is something really important?
Yes. When I went onto the Jeremy Vine Show, which is listened to by millions of people, people started to find me by email, phoning me up to say, this is a terrible thing, we need to help. And that's when I sensed that this was not just a big issue, it was a big emotional issue. Because people in Britain feel this issue about Gurkhas in their heart.
Okay.
They don't feel it just in their head. They
It's
don't.
the history, is it? Or
It's about history. Nearly every British family will have grandparents or old aunties and uncles who will have served with Gurkhas in the war, or know that their ancestors had served with the Gurkhas. So the story of the Gurkhas is like woven
Okay.
like a thread, and it touches people in their heart. And I knew from those first few days that this was a story that the country had to hear, and it was a battle that just had to be won.
And then what were the next steps that you took?
Well, the first one was to go to the media. I had some very funny stories. I took a retired Gurkha called Burrow with me to a BBC studio to do the Jeremy Vine show, and we sat there with our headphones on, nervously waiting to go live on air to 7 million people, because at that time I'd never done any of that. And Burrow, who was with me, he certainly had never done that before. So that was the first job, was to get it in the media. I think we were on the front page of the Daily Express possibly three times in 3 weeks. But then I knew that we had to do more than just get the story out. We had to start to fight. And at that time I was, in my own little area, quite a prominent Liberal Democrat. So I phoned my party leader, Charles Kennedy, and said to him, Charles, this is terrible. I've come across this issue. Did you know about it? To be honest, he didn't really understand. So I had to go and see him in London and brief his colleagues.
That's amazing though, isn't it? Because the leader of parties, they're not even aware of the issues that's going on.
Yes. Well, I think there were very few politicians who were aware. I would count Anne Widdecombe, who is a Conservative.
Yeah, she was. Yeah.
She was aware.
She was involved as well in terms of highlighting the issues, wasn't she?
Yes, but very few politicians really understood the issue. Again, that was one of the obstacles we had to overcome. But once Charles Kennedy was persuaded of the issue, he helped me to get it on the floor of the Liberal Democrat conference in Bournemouth in 2004, which was quite a big event because you get national TV covering that. And I was allowed, under special rules, to address the whole conference, and a group of retired Gurkhas came down, and one of the things I'll never forget is when they walked in the room, the whole room stood up. Every single person stood up. 2,000 people just stood up, and you could feel that bond with them. Bear in mind the campaign had only just started. It was quite extraordinary. So I started to build up the political will, and then slowly over the years we did more and more things to highlight the issue. And then of course in 2008 I got Joanna Lumley involved, which was a bit like putting an atom bomb in the campaign, because as we'd grown and grown and grown and built momentum, when we got her involved, because she's so famous, the media went stratospheric.
That's amazing, the journey that you just told us about,
Yes, and there is another thread in that journey, that I knew in my mind that you had to fight this cause in the media, because that's touching people, that's talking to people. You had to fight it with the politicians, but we also had to fight it with the law. And at the time, quite separate from me.
Would you count those as the main hurdles in the...
I wouldn't say they're the hurdles, I'd say they're the three fronts that you have to fight the war on. Media, politics, and the law. For instance, if you win in the law, you tell the media, which gets public attention, which then influences the politicians, who can then affect the law. Those three things have to be fought all the time. One feeds off the other. That's the most important thing. But the lawyers came involved because they, quite separate from me, started to help individual Gurkhas going through the asylum and immigration process. And when I had some big public events in London, marches and rallies, they started to come and stand in the crowd. And at first I thought they were the MOD.
All right.
I thought they were civil servants. I thought, they're strange men stood at the back, all in black suits. I thought this was the civil servants coming out to hear what we were trying to do.
All right.
But they were a fantastic firm of lawyers called Howe & Co. And
So Howe & Co. and myself started to work closely together. And then when Joanna came on, they were the three main forces fighting on the three main fronts of the law, the politics and the media.
And what an amazing team it turned out to be, isn't it?
Yes. They had it's one of those examples where if you took each of the three components and added them up, something happened which made it more than the sum of the individual parts.
That's right.
Maybe the way we all thought, the way we communicated, the passion, it came together like all great teams do. There was that little bit of something that said, this is special and we're going to do this.
Yeah, and apart from the individuals that you just mentioned, were there any other particular individuals or organizations or media group that played a key role in ensuring the success of the campaign?
There were many.
And I can name a few, but if I miss anyone, it's not because their contribution wasn't important, but like all great campaigns, there are hundreds and hundreds of small contributions which, when taken together, make the campaign what it is. The Daily Express newspaper was simply outstanding. They were brilliant. The Sun newspaper, towards the end, they too were brilliant.
Okay.
One particular man, an individual, Sir Jack Hayward, he was a phenomenal influence. He lived out in the Bahamas. So you're probably thinking now, hang on, we've got Joanna, we've got Peter, we've got the lawyers, and then this man in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
He saw it on satellite TV. He saw us fighting. And because he's a very wealthy man, and we needed just a little bit of money at that time to get a website going,
All right.
and he just sent an email and said, how much do you need? Out of the blue. And Joanna and I weren't quite sure who this email was from. And when I said we needed a few thousand, he sent about 4 times as much.
I mean, those are the types of stories that we haven't heard in the media or we haven't read, you know, and it would be great to bring those stories out.
Well, do you know I'm writing a book?
All right.
I've nearly finished.
Okay, when is it going to be published?
1st of October.
All right.
I've written 52,000 words.
Gosh.
And in that book are all these little stories of all the things that happen, maybe behind the scenes, out of the glare of the media.
Okay, and what's going to be the title of the book?
I think it's probably going to be called I can't say it like Joanna Lumley said it. Ayo Gurkhali.
Ayo Gurkhali. All right.
I think that's what it's called, but the title.
What an appropriate title, though, isn't it?
It would be, yeah. But it starts from the start point is when those 4 retired Gurkhas came to knock on my door.
Yeah.
I'm still in regular touch with 2 of them.
Okay.
And the last bit of the book is a very tiny thing which touched me only a few weeks ago. I was at home in Folkestone. I live quite remote in the countryside on top of a hill, and I was just looking out over my little balcony that looks down into the valley, and out of the corner of my eye I saw a flash of colour past the drive.
Okay.
And it was a Gurkha lady in her sari
Okay.
going for a walk. And for some reason that really it upset me in a nice way, because I knew that the whole campaign, it's making me go tearful now, the whole campaign, she could walk there.
Yeah,
You see
it's
what I
been
mean?
worthwhile then.
Yeah, but isn't it odd how such a tiny thing like that, it was a Saturday morning and I just saw her out of the corner of my eye, and it just really made me feel good. But the book's got all these stories in, of all the ups and downs, the tears, the anger, the upset, the confusion.
How wonderful, though, you know, it would be great, the whole process, because most of the time we just saw snippets of what was going on, but yourself going through the whole process, you felt a lot more, 100 times more. Thank you for that wonderful, description. So how did you, I've always wanted to ask you this, how you felt on that day in April 2009 when you were out there in the Parliament Square with the Gurkhas, and in came the news that the government had been defeated in the Commons vote on Gurkha immigration policy.
I can tell you how I felt, because I was not actually outside, I was inside the House of Commons.
In a tiny office. Because even though the House of Commons and the Houses of Parliament look a fantastic grand building, all the offices are small and ancient. Okay. And we had to borrow
the office of the Liberal Democrat MP Paul Burstow. He's called the Whip. He's the one that keeps all the other Lib Dem MPs in check, or he was at the time. Okay. We had to borrow his office. So, and we were crammed in. There was myself, there was Joanna, there was all the lawyers from How & Co. We're all crammed in. Yeah. And on the wall was a TV monitor which was showing you what was going on in the chamber.
Okay.
And we'd watched the debates. Joanna had been physically in the public gallery watching most of it, but she came into this little office to be with us for when the vote was called. And we actually thought that the odds of winning that vote were 1 in 10 million. We thought what we'd do is we'd have a real big debate, argument, we'd push the government, get lots of media, maybe 350 MPs would vote for the upholding of the government, and we'd lose by 20, 30, 40.
Yeah.
So I was actually thinking I mustn't let all those thousands of Gurkhas outside feel disappointed if we don't actually win. So we're sat there.
Yeah.
Some MPs go past the door and shout to Joanna, friendly, great campaign, keep going, probably not going to win this vote. Ian Duncan Smith said, great campaign, shame you're not going to win the vote. And we were like, oh, you know. And then the people walked down the aisle on the monitor, and suddenly the wrong side started to wave their order papers.
Yeah.
So we're looking, thinking, that's not right. And it went dead silent. I mean, dead silent. And we heard the speaker say eyes to the right and nays to the left, whatever he does.
Right.
And it dawned on us that we'd won. And I'm telling you, Joanna leapt off the floor about 14 inches off. And I leapt into the air. Everybody, and in my mind, I have this flash photograph of everybody so excited.
Leaping up in the air.
Yeah, Joanna shrieked like a schoolgirl.
Yeah.
And me, I'm a very old-fashioned fuddy-duddy. I hugged the assistant to Nick Clegg. I don't go hugging people often. Everybody hugged her. It was delirium. It was the most exciting shock. It was absolutely amazing experience to share. And even more than that, we'd agreed that after the vote, we would walk out with Joanna, Nick Clegg and David Cameron to face the Gurkhas and explain what had happened. Probably to say that even though we'd lost this vote, Cameron and Clegg were together. Funny that, isn't it? It happened in real life later. And that they would, after the next election, deal with the problem and let the Gurkhas stay. And it was at that point when Cameron and Clegg were talking to the media, it felt like the earth had moved.
Yeah.
Suddenly there were media everywhere. All the big heavyweight journalists who do Radio 4, John Pienaar, Nick Robin, all those people were all around, and you just knew that something very big had happened. And it was a wonderful day.
And the wonderful way in which you captured the British public's imagination and how the public actually came behind the campaign and because it was absolutely wonderful to experience. But having said that, when yourselves, when we as Gurkhas finally saw Nick Clegg come out with David Cameron, who was then the opposition leader.
Yes.
We were, although it was a wonderful surprise, it was nonetheless quite surprising that David Cameron had not spoken on the issue as much, but on that day he had suddenly appeared on stage. Is it because there were other discussions going on beforehand with them, or
yes,
that we were unaware of?
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate?
I had worked out that we had to get the Liberal Democrats, who were pretty much, totally behind the issue, we had to get them and the Conservative Party together on the issue. Now, up until that point in British politics, it's really quite hard to get parties to work together. So we had to work out how to do that. So
a lot of Labour MPs defected as well, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
They did. But because we feared that they would be very much under the control of their party authorities, we concentrated on the Lib Dems and the Conservatives. Because, to be honest, if all the Lib Dems voted to let the Gurkhas stay and the Conservatives didn't, we were never going to win. So I had to get the Conservatives on side.
Okay.
So just a few days before that meeting, I'm talking a few days, it was the Sunday before, I was at home in my garden doing a barbecue. Yeah. And I have Nick Clegg in this ear.
Okay.
I have Joanna in this ear. And I worked with Joanna to make it so she would phone David Cameron and get an appointment to see him. So all the planning for that debate and that vote was done on the Sunday before in a sunny back garden in Folkestone. And Joanna definitely went to see David Cameron to try and get him on board.
Yeah.
And she did have to have another conversation with him on the day of the vote to just make sure that the Conservative Party realised that our connection with the British public was very strong, and the public was expecting that of the Conservatives.
Is it only because the public was expecting that they gave in, or is it in principle that they backed the campaign?
That's a very good question. There were definitely a lot of Conservatives who thought the Gurkhas should stay, but I think there were also a lot of Conservatives who thought possibly they shouldn't stay. And I was never totally convinced of the position of Damien Green. I found it hard to understand how he was looking at it. Was he looking at it as an immigration issue, or was he looking at it as a moral issue, as we were, based on the fact that if you're prepared to fight and die for a country, you should be able to live there? Okay. It's fair to say
that the bringing on of the Conservative Party was very much at the last minute.
But vital, wasn't it?
Yes. I mean, one of my disappointments, going back some years in the campaign to 2004, 2005, 2006, was that Michael Howard, who was leader of the Conservative Party for part of that period, he was the MP for Folkestone. I thought he would have taken the issue, but I never thought he took that issue very seriously. That surprised me, because he was leader of the opposition. He was stood at the dispatch box. He could have taken this issue way back and dealt with it, but he didn't. I don't know why. You'd have to ask him that.
Maybe waiting for you to happen. Anyway, 2 years down the line, since that victorious day, how do you think has the Gurkha veterans community fared in the UK? In particular, the older veterans who settled post-Gurkha Justice campaign.
Okay, well, I think it's a story of enormous success. In any issue, there's a balance between a good outcome and a not so good outcome. I think in this issue, it's 99.9% brilliant. And in the difficult world we all live in, to me that makes it brilliant. Okay. I see in Folkestone Gurkha taxis. I see Gurkha Hill. I see Everest Cash and Carry. I see security firms, I see bus drivers, I see people living as part of our community, proud to be here, loved by their neighbours, doing well, creating jobs. I met a Gurkha a couple of weeks ago who's got 3 houses in Folkestone, and good luck to him. Wonderful, wonderful success. There are some elderly Gurkhas who, for whatever reason, I think come here, and perhaps they haven't researched it quite enough. Maybe they haven't been given enough help. Maybe some get a bit lonely here. But I think most Gurkha communities I come across are like a big vast family. So I think those cases are very, very much the minority. And I think there's a very nasty part of the media and a pretty unpleasant part of the political world who are trying to find those difficult examples to blow them up out of all proportion and say, oh, this was not the right campaign. Oh, these quotes, these people would be better off back at home.
Making headline news.
Absolutely. So I think it's been an overwhelming success.
Okay. And any thoughts on the recent comments made by the MP Gerald Howarth about the Gurkha migrants in Rushmore?
I am absolutely appalled by those comments. I am appalled to my core. I've read that man's website. It says he's elected to serve all the people of his area. And then he seems to be implying that because lots of retired Gurkhas have come to his area, maybe there's too many there, almost suggesting they should be moved around or dispersed. What kind of language is this? They're retired British Army Gurkhas. They have every right to live in the community around army towns. I'm afraid all the shot's got to get real. All the shot complaining about
army veterans would be like Devonport complaining about Royal Navy veterans, or Lincolnshire complaining about Royal Air Force veterans. Okay. I think his comments are appalling. I think they should be robustly challenged.
Is it quite divisive as well for integration purpose?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely it is. And I think he needs to be reminded that his Conservative Party supported this. He needs to be reminded that these are not what sometimes is now referred to in the press as Nepali immigrants. These are retired British Army soldiers. That's what they are. If there are problems where there aren't enough doctors. I mean, I heard this ridiculous statement that the medical services were being overwhelmed and a surgery had to take on an extra doctor. What's the news in that? If a lot of Scottish soldiers settled around, say, I don't know, Colchester because there was a Scottish regiment there, would they complain that they had to employ another doctor? It's being blown up out of proportion, it's divisive.
But why is the media allowing it to happen though, considering that the same media had been speaking in favour of Gurkhas not so long ago? What are your feelings about that?
The media is a big sword. It has a blade down this side. Actually, it's better than that. It's a cookery knife. It can be used that way or that way. But I think the media will go with an issue at 1 minute, and then when that's exhausted, they try to find the story, and if the story is a negative one, they'll go with it.
Whatever sells.
There's an element of whatever sells.
Okay.
I saw an article in the Daily Mail where it had a picture of these depressed and sad and lonely Gurkhas. I think they were in Farnborough or Aldershot. I didn't see a picture of Gurkha taxis, Gurkha Hill, Everest Cash and Carry, the thousands of Gurkhas that work in security at drive bus. I didn't see that picture. But the media is the media.
Okay.
The difference with the politicians is they are politicians about people, and they have a duty to represent, and that's why I found the comments of that particular MP absolutely appalling. And I hope it's not the beginnings of an attempt to say, oh well, maybe this policy. In fact, the gentleman said it was an emotional reaction. The fact that they're out of it, an emotion. So a man who runs towards a Japanese machine gun post has his hand blown off and he's blind, and we want him to live here. That's emotion. Well, if that's emotion, I'm totally guilty of emotion. And politics ought to have a lot more of that emotion in it. And I will fight that man, and I will stand up for any Gurkha, any retired Gurkha, against those views expressed by that man. Because I will not accept that what we did was wrong. It was 100%, absolutely, totally right on every moral ground.
And to coming back to the media portrayal, do you think, from where I stand, I see that considering that in relative terms the campaign victory was achieved quite quickly, would this have been possible without mainstream media involvement?
Well, I think it's important to remember that the bit that most people saw was quick, from the summer of 2008 through to the spring of 2009. But it did start in 2004, so there was a lot of build-up and momentum and background work and plotting and thinking and scheming. In the answer to your question about the media, you can't win a campaign like ours without massive media involvement. You have to force your issue up to the top of the pile. People are worried about the NHS, world recession, meltdown in the Middle East, lack of food, population explosion, a million issues. But to get yours there, you've got to drive it through with the media.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not discounting the fact that you actually pressed ahead with the issue with such force that there was no, no means in which the media could discount the fact. But at the same time, from where we stand, we wonder why the same media used to portray the Gurkhas as, unwanted asylum seekers, unwanted immigrants prior to that. Because if you recall some tabloids prior to the Gurkha Justice Campaign, some Gurkhas were caught at the Dover area and they were deported. And the media had reported this incident as the Gurkha being kicked out after being found without a valid visa. So was there any series of incidents that actually captured the media's imagination as well as to why we were the deserving, why the Gurkhas were deserving at last?
Yeah, I literally think you can put it down to that combination of Tej Limbu actually being arrested against his will and a particular journalist called James Slack at the Daily Express, who I spoke to, and because he got it, he put it in the Daily Express big time. The moment that happens, that's that crucial first step, then the momentum starts to go your way.
Okay.
Maybe a different phone call on a different day, a different journalist may have had a different outcome. All fires start with the first strike of the match, don't they?
Okay, that's quite a convincing answer. So, post-Gurkha Justice Campaign, you are not as much in the media, although the Gurkha Gurkhas keep, making headlines now and then.
Yeah.
Do you still follow the Gurkhas in the media and tabloids?
Oh yes, yeah.
You do?
Oh, very much so, yes.
All right.
I even have a Google alert for the word Gurkha. So every time they're mentioned anywhere in the world that Google can see, it picks up, and I keep a very close interest. Yesterday I was in the House of Commons with 3 retired Gurkhas speaking to the Vice Chair of the All-Party Working Group on Gurkha Affairs about particular problems which I know still exist. So I haven't stopped.
Anything to do with pensions?
There was actually a part.
Okay, we'll come to that later on.
Right.
Okay. So if you do follow the Gurkhas in the news and tabloids, post Gurkha Justice campaign, when the media later on started portraying Gurkhas as overwhelmingly army and benevolent charities, how did that make you feel?
Very angry.
Was that really happening though?
Well, I was hearing stories from charities saying that this man, retired Gurkha, arrived at Heathrow with 2 suitcases and nothing in the world. And that might have happened. If it happened, it's a tragedy. It should be investigated why he arrived so ill-prepared, and he should be helped. It should not be used as a stick to batter the hundreds, thousands of other Gurkhas who've come and have fabulous lives. It's all about perspective. And I didn't expect some service charities, remember, charities about giving, loving, I didn't expect those agencies to be almost critical of this decision. If I was a charity and there was a destitute Gurkha at Heathrow, the first thing you do is not complain he's there, you go and help him.
Yeah, but they do rely on funding sources, isn't it? And when there's limited funding, and but I remember during that time I ran an editorial in our website in which I highlighted the shortcomings of the government in failing to tap the plentiful Gurkha resources and expertise available here and in Nepal that would have been more than willing to help to plan for effective settlement and integration process for incoming veterans. But the media has gone one step further and criticized the Gurkha Justice campaigners for failing older veterans by having no negotiated long-term settlement and integration policy. Looking back now, over 2 years after that historic victory in April 2009, are there any things that you think could have been done a little bit better or differently?
Well, I would say that we won the campaign. And if you start out and your aim is to win and you win, then you've done it. I never thought it was the responsibility of the campaign team, of Joanna, the lawyers, or myself, to actually get involved in all the policy and other aspects of the outfall of that decision.
Okay.
Having said that, and not a lot of people know this, Joanna and I went to at least 2 meetings with very senior people at the MOD and the Home Office, completely outside of the media, one was before we won, and one was after we won, to say to them, we're worried.
Yeah, how soon after you won?
Days. About a week maybe, a very short time, I can't remember.
And afterwards, because the media portrayal started only about last year or so.
Before the victory and just after, we went to these meetings, and the MOD said, well actually, it wasn't the policy we wanted, but we are the servants of the government, so we are planning to open the resettlement office in Kathmandu. We're working with the Home Office on new leaflets and information packs to give to veterans, so that when they applied for their Red Book and preparation for coming, they get a brief. And they said they were working with the Gurkha Welfare Trust, they were going to contact county councils and social services, and that's what they should have done.
So you took your word, their word, and...
Yes. And I think they did a lot of that. They could do more, but the idea that there was no preparation, I think, is wrong. It was just not quite enough, and it was a bit slow.
All right. Had you anticipated the fallout though?
Yeah, we knew that it wouldn't be, that there would need to be a degree of preparation. In fact, there was actually a hearing of the Home Affairs Select Committee before the victory, a formal hearing of it, where all these issues were raised and discussed.
Right. It's just that what I fail to understand is, let's say a property developer gets a piece of land and he wants to develop a number of properties there. He will have to apply for planning permission, in which he will have to satisfy the local authority that he will have the GP surgery there, schools, parks, whatever is necessary for the community. Whereas the media had said that thousands or tens of thousands of Gurkhas were coming here.
Yeah, it's going to be 100,000 at one point.
Let's.
It was going to be more than the number of Gurkhas in the world.
Okay. Anyway, let's stop the ridiculous, and if we come back to the let's say the thousands, tens of thousands, then I mean, if a simple community can expect to get a GP surgery, community park as well as schools.
Yes.
Why, when the thousands of Gurkhas that were coming here, why cannot they anticipate the same level of service, or why is it that the government was so lacking in planning in that direction in terms of policy?
Well, I think they probably never expected to lose, so they were caught by surprise, because when we won, I mean, we won like there and then, didn't we? So I could understand, I could forgive them for being a bit slow to get things set up. But the thing I think we've all got to keep in mind, both sides of this issue, is the total number of people concerned is actually small. Even if 15,000 Gurkhas come to Britain, each with 2 dependents, and you're up to 45,000 people. In terms of the massive movement of people into Britain over the last 10 years, it's tiny.
Yeah,
it's
but
really tiny.
Was there ever any anticipation that they would congregate in certain areas? Because if you look into research into migrant groups, coming to UK, they always have concentrated areas and, so-called enclaves and, ghettos.
Yes.
I don't believe the Gurkhas have come to that stage. But at the same time, was there no anticipation at all that, they would be attracted to certain...
Well, it certainly was for me. I mean, I expected lots to come and live in Folkestone, because they're dad, aren't they? Yeah. Very often, son is in Shorncliffe Barracks and dad wants to come and live in Folkestone. So I anticipated it.
So, I mean, what about the local authorities? Was there any anticipation from the local authorities?
Yes, there was.
Especially where there are military towns?
Yeah, there was. I know that there was definitely very high-level contacts from the MOD and from the Brigade of Gurkhas with the key local authorities. Whether those local authorities were given the money to actually do what they needed to do, that's a different issue, and I don't know that. But it wasn't as if they were totally unaware of this. They knew it was coming.
Yeah, but given the gravitas that you as the campaigners had at that time, could you not have negotiated just that bit further so that, there was some funding if the Gurkhas were to arrive in those areas, so that these issues that the locals are now having to hear from their local politicians that the Gurkhas, some of them, are becoming a burden, that would never arise.
But the system exists, doesn't it? Every area's got its councillors, its MP. It's not for me to tell the people in Aldershot, the Member of Parliament for Aldershot, the council in Aldershot, how to organise their affairs.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I mean, what I'm trying to say is, let me be specific, because at that point in time, the whole nation was listening to the Gurkha justice campaigners.
Yes.
You were in every news headlines, and whatever
Absolutely.
you spoke had the gravitas.
Yes.
So, let's say after the campaign was won,
Yes.
if you had asked, or if you had, done some research and said, all right, it is likely that most of the Gurkhas are going to, congregate in military towns because of so-and-so reasons. In that case, how are we going to ask the government to help prepare those local authorities? So.
But we've been at a meeting of the Home Affairs Select Committee where the MOD and the Home Office had said they'll work with all the different charities and community groups and county councils. So we assume that they have this... Remember, the Gurkha Justice Campaign team was me, Joanna, and the lawyers.
Yeah, please do not feel that I am... not dishonouring what you've done.
No, I don't see it that way. But you have to. We have not got the resources to do that. The government has all the resources, the civil servants, the politicians to do all the research, the planning, the integration of services. Our job was to win it.
So now
their job was to cope.
Okay, all right. I'll come back to that issue again in a moment. But there has since been lots of noises in some local media and community forums on the changing face of society in some areas, let's say Rushmore.
Or Folkestone.
Or Folkestone, or other, Reading, where the locals have commented on the wide influx and concentration of Gurkhas in particular areas. Do you think we can still do things to that there is a smoother transition of and an effective dispersal of veterans across the UK, so that these issues will not, keep coming up?
Can I answer that in reverse? I don't want people to be... I'd be happy if every one of my neighbours was a Gurkha.
Thank you for that. Okay. Okay, what do you feel still needs to be done to enable Gurkhas, particularly the older veterans, to settle and integrate better in the UK?
Lots more language training, particularly for elderly Gurkha ladies. Some brilliant things happening in Folkestone. There's a language school there that's been putting tens of Gurkha ladies through really good English courses because it gives them confidence and independence. I think support from social services and county councils to the Gurkha community itself to make sure that people are being looked after. I think a degree of transit housing when people come here. I think the government could help enormously by, say, an elderly retired couple come, they're both in their mid-50s or early 60s, if there was somewhere they could stay for 3 or 4 weeks until another house came over. There's all these things that could be done.
That sounds brilliant, actually. So would you be willing to, step forward and...
I was at the House of Commons talking about it yesterday.
All right, brilliant. We anticipate more, news on that matter then.
The only, because you brought it up, the only problem I have helping Gurkhas now is there's a group of Gurkhas here, there's a group there, there's a group there, there's a group there, there's a group there. This group won't talk to this group, this won't talk to this group, and I'm confused. Oh, what do I do? If I talk to this group gets cross with me. One group pretends I don't exist. I understand there's one group of Gurkhas who works like Peter Carroll never did anything. I don't want the praise, but it's just bizarre when you've helped somebody and they will actually say that you didn't. The only thing I need is for the Gurkhas to come as close together as they can and say, this is what we want.
Okay, all right. I think that's a brilliant message. Also, I would like to ask you about some of the concerns that's raised by locals, mainly in Rushmore area, in the media and forums, about the number of older Gurkha veterans they notice outside, hanging about in the street. However, we are aware that there seems to be no specifically allocated place where the Gurkhas can go to, the veterans can go to during daylight hours to socialize or, or to learn new skills and so forth. Secondly, I found through my own research into Gurkha settlement and integration process in UK that a significant majority of these veterans would like to learn English, like you said, and new skills to keep themselves engaged, to become more self-sufficient, and aid their integration process. How important, in your view, is it to learn English and be culturally aware for those wishing to settle here?
Yes.
And if you feel that's important and there is, gaps in service delivery, can yourself and Joanna perhaps consider lending your voice to make this happen?
I think it's very important for people to speak English here because I know how awkward I feel, even though I think it's probably, most people would agree, I'm close to the retired Gurkha community. When yesterday I was in the House of Commons with someone, with Bim from Ashford, who's very good at English, so we talked. He had with him 2 colleagues who couldn't really do English, so I felt disrespectful to them because it was as if I was talking about them, even though they were there. Now, maybe you should say I should speak Nepali, but I can't learn it that quickly. So I think it's very, very important for people to speak English because when they can speak English, I think it gives them a confidence and an approachability. So that when they're in communities like Rushmore, if everyone's speaking English, it tends to reduce a barrier rather than lift a barrier. So I think they should do that.
What about there being no place for the older veterans to actually go and learn the...
But I do think that bit's down to the retired Gurkha community. I think the community, which I know it does in very many places, come together. In Folkestone, if you go to the Oddfellows Hall on Broomfield Road, or certainly a few years ago, and I used to go there with the Gurkhas, that was like Gurkha Town. They went there. They sorted that out themselves.
Yeah, but
are they worried? 2 things are in my mind here. If it's about learning skills, then there should be more effort where you'd have to work with local authorities to get access to those training courses. the social side of it, the Gurkha community maybe will have to raise a bit of money to rent the village hall for 3 hours on a Wednesday. I think that's down to the Gurkhas themselves.
Yeah, and how about working in partnership with the local authority?
Well,
that's chipping in half and half.
Well, I know that in Ashford, well, I better not say I know, I think in Ashford, didn't the Borough Council let the retired Gurkhas have the use of an office?
They did, yeah, they do.
Well, what a great
It was
example.
until recently, but I think they've now asked of. Yes, but working in partnership, do you see that as the way forward?
Absolutely. It's got to be a bit of charity, a bit of community, and a bit of local authority. But none of that should be an obstacle to the fundamental rightness of the decision that your retired Gurkhas are living here.
Okay. I would also like to put to you my observation that it's not just my observation, it's the observation of the community that we find lots of older veterans and their spouses having to share a house. Let's say they have bedrooms, sharing with other, they have one bedroom and there's another couple in the next bedroom. So let's say a house with 3 bedrooms will have 3 couples. And many have, mentioned the vast inconvenience and lack of privacy in that sort of dwelling. Do you think that's appropriate given the,
Well, my understanding was that the retired Gurkhas could apply for assistance with housing benefits, and that I thought in most cases they could probably get a place of their own. If I'm wrong on that, someone needs to actually explain that to me, and then I'll form a view.
From this, inconvenient truth, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your satisfaction level with the Gurkha Justice Campaign outcome?
Well, so I know what answer I'm going to give you, but I'm going to preface it because I'm going to say that the fact I'm going to give it 10 out of 10 is not me seeking the glory. I think it was 10 out of 10 because the cause was right, the Gurkhas are loved, the British people overwhelmingly wanted it to happen, and we made it happen. Very rare in life does that happen. To actually win a campaign against all those odds is very rare, and it's the people who deserve the praise. There's 2 sets of people. There's the Gurkhas, and there's the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people all over Britain and the world who said, I'm going to put my name to that, I'm going to write to my MP about that, I'm going to phone my MP about that. They're the real winners. They're the people who deserve 10 out of 10.
Seems like yesterday, but wasn't it? It's 2 years ago. Anyway, similarly, on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with how the veterans are coping, or in some instances struggling to cope here in UK now?
Well, I would say it's a 9 out of 10, where the overwhelming majority of stories are fantastic, brilliant, happy outcomes, prospering families, hard-working people, sharing in our community. There are some instances where maybe people have come not well briefed, who are struggling. Every single one of those needs to be helped, but they shouldn't detract from the vast majority of the success.
Okay, but if we were to point out in future, let's say, if there was a collective evidence that the most vulnerable of those veterans were suffering in such and such way, would you be willing to come forward and perhaps lend your helping hand and face once again?
Yes.
Do you think Joanna would do the same?
She's been very helpful on a number of occasions, but I mean, I'll give you one example, because I don't want to break any confidences, but there's one example. As a family, heartbreaking, 3 young people, I think they're aged 21, 19 and 13. Dad died, Gurkha died. They're in Nepal. Mum's over here trying to earn a living. She died at 45.
Oh, God.
So suddenly those 3 boys have got no one. I fought tooth and nail. This was only about 9 months ago. Fought tooth and nail to get them in. I went right to the top of the
Whereabouts
UK.
was this?
The Ashford.
All right.
And I got them in to see Mum, and Mum died while they were here. Mercifully, they got to see their mum. And now the government is arguing about whether they can stay. So Joanna wrote lots of letters about that, believe me, including to Damien Green.
Yeah. And has that been sorted? Or?
No, that's still going through appeal. I mean, that's the one where probably I'll get a chain, and I'll chain myself to the 3 of them, and I'll chain myself to a lamppost in Dover, because it'll be over my dead body they go.
Anyway, good luck with that. We hope it'll have positive results. Okay, our final question is regarding the long-standing issue of Gurkha pensions,
Yes.
which predates the Gurkha Justice Campaign itself.
Yes.
Are you in support of equal pensions for all Gurkha veterans in line with their British counterparts?
Right. I'm in support of the fact that there are terrible injustices with pensions. I'm not sure that it's a winnable argument to get the whole situation put right 100%. I'm not sure that's winnable because as you go back through time and multiply the numbers up, I think it would cost a huge sum of money. That, in principle, it's right that it should be put right. Whether the country could afford it, whether it's winnable, I'm not so sure. I tend to look at this situation slightly differently than the retired Gurkhas, and I break it down.
Okay.
First of all, I look at the 4,000 or 5,000 Second World War veterans living back in Nepal on £35 a month. Not even a pension. It's called a pension, isn't it? But it's not a pension. It's a charitable handout from the Gurkha Welfare Trust. I look at them and I think, that makes me feel ill. That is just horrifically wrong. And the government could easily say, for that very, very elderly, very vulnerable, very poor group of people, for almost no money, they could transform those people's lives. They shouldn't be on £35 a month. They should be on 2 or 3 times that, and the government could afford that. So if someone came to me and said there's a campaign to sort that out, I would say, let's go for it. I met one man who'd had his eye blown out, his foot blown off. I met him, saw him in Nepal. Tragically, we missed him in some problem. He couldn't get close enough to see us. But I saw it on a BBC film afterwards. And he's there. I mean, that's just wrong. So if we say that, that's a campaign to fight. Got it.
Okay.
At this end, the Gurkhas have now got the ability, current Gurkhas, to transfer to the British Army pension scheme. Brilliant. Equality.
Yeah.
Fantastic. But any years before 1997, they're chopping them to about a quarter.
Yeah, that's right.
Now I look at that one, I think that is actually wrong because they conceded the ground for the ones after 97, for the years after 97, so that needs to be dealt with. When it comes to this probably 20,000 Gurkhas who retired in 1970, 1980, early 1990s, if the government couldn't afford to do a full retrospective total equalisation, you just imagine how complicated that would be when you joined how many years ago. My solution would be that the government ought to say, we're going to do a deal, and I don't mean deal in a kind of cheap sense, that to acknowledge that injustice, to draw a line under it, here is a one-off payment to those people, so they get something. Because there is an argument that to get something is better than to fight for what you should have but never get it. So that's how I look at the pension issue.
Yeah, but who would judge the amount, though?
Well, what I would do is I would call a Grand Council. If we could ever get the Gurkhas to work together, I'd call a Grand Council to try and thrash out, get some really intellectually switched on analysts from Nepal, so they're not biased by being part of the British government, to work this out, to scope it, to understand it, and then put a proposal to the government. At the moment, I could start a campaign now to equal British pensions, but as it is, I'm not sure we'd win it because it's much more confusing than the citizenship one. That was, they're not allowed in, they should be, black and white. Now it's all about different groups of Gurkhas at different times.
All right, okay, although, that was almost half incomplete answer, but, given the circumstances at the moment.
It's my honest feeling.
Okay, and I appreciate that and welcome it as well. Finally, we have some questions and messages from visitors to Gurkhas.
These are going to be the fastballs, aren't they?
Somewhat, yeah. There's a message from Mr. Sunuwar, who's from Plumstead. He writes, Dear Peter, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your valuable role in Gurkha Justice Campaign. I have 2 questions. What makes Peter Carroll tick? Do you want to answer that so that I'll...
I was right. That was a fastball question. Do you know, I'm going to be very honest with you because when I deal with this issue, I think it's right. I sort of bare my soul. Do you know what makes me tick? When I was very young, I came from a very lovely family, but pretty poor. And I was aware in the world that there were people who were disadvantaged and people who were generally richer and more well connected, more opportunity. There was an inequality of opportunity. And no matter how old I get, because I'm hugely old now, I'm 50, whenever I see that feeling that the little guy has been done, something gets me in here. It's just part of me. And it's probably wrong for everything in my life in terms of me making money or having a great business career or being in a great political career. The thing that actually gets me, I can't walk away.
Okay, the sense of justice needs to be there, is it?
Yeah, because maybe that would have been me.
Okay, so you empathise with
Yes.
people who are suffering injustice.
I'm frightened of his second question.
Don't worry, it's not that bad. But you did mention family, so if you don't mind me asking, what is family for you? I mean, how many have you got kids? Because like the Gurkhas know Peter Carroll did this. We are thankful, but has Peter Carroll got a family that we should be equally grateful for? Because without that support from the
Yes.
from the family, I think.
Well, I have got a very wonderful family. I was married for a long time and then separated and eventually remarried. And Lynn, who I'm married to now, did a great deal in all the Gurkha justice work herself. I had no children in my first marriage. And when I went to live with Lynn, I ended up with 2 stepdaughters, 2 foster children, 3 dogs, 3 cats, and 5 grandchildren.
I'll stop counting. I don't know how many that number too, but anyway,
Yes.
sounds like a wonderful, happy family unit.
Yes.
And long may it last,
Yes, and I'm not saying this just because I'm talking to you, but it does actually matter to me, and this is going to make me a bit upset, so I'm going to be a bit embarrassed if I can't hold a tear here. A lot of Gurkhas have held my hand, my arm, and said that they're my brother.
Yes,
Like-
you do have the,
Like Dangarung in Folkestone, and even though we have a few arguments every now and then, to me that's really special. So that's part of my family too. See, you're making me go weepy now.
That was not the intention, but it's good to see the human side of Peter Carroll sometimes.
Yes, not many people do. Well, a lot are probably going to see it now.
You need a break. Do you need a break?
No, I'm fine.
Are you
I'm fine.
okay? All right. Okay. And he asks, Mr. Sunawar asked another question. Will the Gurkha Justice Campaign team be working together again to help Gurkhas settle better in the UK?
I don't think it will ever form back into a formal team. I'm more than happy for my part to do what I can, like I was yesterday in the House of Commons, helping us at 5 or 6 different points. I know that Howe & Co do loads of work for Gurkhas. They got hundreds of Gurkha clients and they do hundreds of hours for nothing. So that's still happening. And I think if ever there was a Gurkha crisis, I think a certain famous actress might come back.
It's great to hear that. This particular question, she asked 2 questions as well, and
Who is
it's
this
from
lady?
Gurkha Youth.
Ooh.
So it's her name is Jyoti Gurung. She's from Aldershot.
Yeah.
She writes, Dear Peter, 2 questions. First of all, what can Gurkha youths do to uphold the fathers' and forefathers' glorious name?
They can hold both cultures. They can have in this hand the culture from Nepal and the Gurkha culture, and in this hand take the British and Western culture, but take the best of both. I know there's a few young Gurkha people who maybe have found life in the West, drink, drugs, just a few maybe got involved. Don't go down that route. Don't lose that sense of good behaviour, of family life. Don't lose all that. But equally, young people growing up in the West, I think, may be freer in some ways than growing up in Nepal. So the art of being a young person, I think, is to have those 2 things. Because what 2 fantastic cultures come together.
Okay. She adds, how do you feel when the media and some political figures at times portray Gurkhas as burden on taxpayers?
Outraged. I would take anybody who said that and send them off somewhere.
All right.
I'd rather have a Gurkha living with me than a British person who said that.
There's Mrs. Rai, who's from Folkestone, Mrs. K. Rai. She writes, Dear Peter, do you recall any event during the Gurkha Justice Campaign that is most memorable or dear to you?
Yes, but you're going to make me cry when I
Again?
tell you. Yes.
Please.
Okay.
Only if you feel comfortable.
No, I want to share it with you because actually you said something to me early on which I'd never really thought about. That I was in the middle of it all, but you've told me just earlier, didn't you, that you didn't see it all. And so there'll be many retired Gurkhas and their families and associates who never saw it. The Gurkha campaign took me to visit famous people, 10 Downing Street, House of Commons, big things, trips to Nepal. It took me to the depths of despair in the early days when I didn't think we could get through, how would we win, all those things. But the one thing that shines through it happened in Kathmandu on the very first massive public meeting we did, when we were just amazed by the reaction in Nepal and Kathmandu. There were thousands of people and lights and press and policemen and chaos. And in one of those events, somebody fought their way to the front and just got hold of both my hands and said thank you. And somebody whispered in my ear that was Ram Rai, the Falklands veteran.
Oh, right.
Who'd been denied entry to Britain. That's all he said, and he wandered off. And for me, that was it.
Okay. How poignant is
Yes, see, it made me cry twice in an interview. No one's ever done that before.
But, you know, it's I think the emotional part of it,
That's what life's about.
You just cannot detach it.
No.
I suppose when people have given up their lives, their youth and their blood, their limbs for you, isn't it? So, anyway, sorry about that. I didn't intentionally want to,
Well, it wasn't you.
make
It was
it tearful.
Mrs. Rai.
It's Mrs. Rai, but
she lives
I think
in
that's
Folkestone,
a wonderful answer anyway. So
Yeah.
much appreciated. This one's from Nepal, and his name is Mr. Dhan Prasad Limbu. Dear Peter, if you had one message for our Gurkha organizations, what would it be? He has a message. Also, could you kindly let Joanna Limbley know that we are forever indebted for her support for Gurkhas?
My one message would be, be closer together rather than further apart. If you could, unite. And if you can't unite, get close. And I think Joanna knows, but I'll tell her that he asked that question and made that point.
Okay. One more. This is an email sender who has only given a username. He or she is probably from Reading, and the username is Sajawasi. Dear Peter, are you going ahead with your political career? Is there any particular political or social goal that you are pursuing? If yes, good luck with it all.
Well, thanks for the good wishes, but to be honest, I'm taking a bit of a rest from politics.
Oh, yeah.
I fought 3 times to become an MP, and part of me feels that probably that part of my life is over. I'm very fortunate that as I move on and do new things, I get involved in lots of causes. I'm involved with one now, which is to save the tiger in the wild for somebody who is a very famous British artist and conservationist who, although I've only met him a few times, I kind of sense his spirit.
Oh, yeah.
And
the passion, you mean?
Yeah, I want to do a good job for him. I'm helping a charity in London where people who are blind and disabled make products and sell them and earn money to employ more of their colleagues who've got physical and mental disadvantages. And I just think maybe that's what my life's about now, is trying to help people in that way.
That's apart from the campaign to lower petrol costs, is it?
I do, yeah. That's apart from that.
Okay, but thank you so much for those answers. Wonderful, wonderful interview that I've had the joy to experience with yourself. Finally, if there's any specific message that you would like to give to the wider Gurkha community, or if you want to do it in parts, we're happy for you to give the message to the older veterans, the serving Gurkhas, and the Gurkha children.
Okay. Well, I think I've answered the Gurkha children one with that lady's, the young person's question earlier about trying to keep the best of both worlds, the best of the Nepali and Gurkha culture and the best of Britain and the Western culture. For everybody else, I think what I'd like to say is that actually by being involved in this campaign, you probably gave me one of the most meaningful things I've ever done in my life. So it's not a one-way debt. I've often said the proudest steps I've ever taken were with you.
And likewise, I'd say, on behalf of the community. But those were my questions. We're finally done. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think you've done a comprehensively brilliant job.
All right. Thank you once again, Mr. Peter Carroll, for your time and contribution. I'm sure that the wider Gurkha community also joins me in thanking you for this interview.
Excellent.
Do you have anything else that you would like to add that we have perhaps missed out during the interview, and maybe you're passionate to share it with the wider Gurkha community?
Well, I'm currently working on a campaign which I think will touch the soul of everybody in Nepal, because the campaign is to save the tiger in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
There's only estimated to be 3,500 wild tigers left on the whole planet. So I'm working with a great team now to try to save every one. And the best thing that anybody listening to this could do is to log on to www.tigertime.info. Sign up. It's not about money. It's like the Gurkha Justice Campaign. I need people's name, their signature, their support. I need not 1,000, not 10,000. I need hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world. So that's www.tigertime.info.
Well, you heard it, folks. Let's do it, because I think it's such a worthwhile cause. And, if we don't do it now, it'll soon be too late.
Yes, time is literally running out.
Exactly. It'll soon become extinct, and we don't want that to happen, So, and once we can do something about it, let us go for it. So, thank you, Peter, for your time and contribution. I think